All right, it's episode 10 of the JP Pod. Let's get right into it today. Xi Jinping said that Russia and China will unite the global South against the West, and said that Russia and China are uniting against what they claim to be the United States trying to dominate the global order. He also said that he wants to strengthen BRICS and unite the global South, along with promote reform of the global governance system. So this is yet another sign of the New World Order forming, of China and Russia trying to knock the U.S. off of the top. And, right now they're kind of winning. Organizations like BRICS are giving countries a safe haven from the United States' weaponization of sanctions and trying to force everyone to obey their desires. And, we continue to isolate ourselves from China and Russia. And instead of realizing that there's enough room for the three of us if we cooperate with them, we've been atop the world order since World War II, and we can't accept that the unipolar world is coming to an end and the multipolar world is pretty much here. I mean, Russia and China aren't at the United States level militarily or economically. I mean, I don't know. Russia's GDP growth last year, with all the sanctions globally put on them, they still outgrew us economically. So, they're inching closer towards us with their economies and their military, and Russia's got landmass on us. China has both landmass and population on us. They both have landmass and population on us. So they have the resources, they have the population, and they're slowly getting the military and the economy to compete with us. And there's been more and more deals being made, not in the US dollar, but instead being made in rubles and yuan, the Chinese currency, that were never done before. Like oil trades were made between countries in rubles instead of the US dollar. Like, the US dollar is losing its power globally, and the collapse of the US dollar really coincides with the collapse of the United States, because that has been our main source of power. Was everybody traded with the US dollar, and we could sanction people for that matter because they had to trade with our currency. And now that's starting to go away, especially like organizations like BRICS. I mean, they want a globalized central currency that gets rid of the United States power as a whole. Our main power has been our dollar and our military. And, our military numbers are going down and our dollar is losing power. So if you look on the other side of the coin, China and Russia, their economies are booming, and their military is, Russia, even with the war in Ukraine going on, their ability to make more of their ability to keep their manufacturing of their weapons up while being at a war because of their booming economy is something that should trouble the United States, because that shows that our sanctions on them, and not only ours, but everybody's sanctions on them practically, except China and all of Russia's allies, they were hit with sanctions like crazy, and yet their economy outgrew us last year in the GDP. So what does that tell you? That our sanctions don't hold as much weight as we would like to think that it does. Why? Because Russia is able to make more trades in its currency of the ruble, not having to rely on the dollar like they used to. And that goes for everybody in the world. I mean, you could choose to join BRICS, and you'll be on the side of not having to rely on the US dollar. So if you somehow piss off the United States, you're not at a threat of being sanctioned by them. I mean, this isn't obviously there's still many trades that are made in the dollar, but we're seeing a trend of more and more trades, big trades like oil trades between countries, not being made in the dollar, instead being made in the ruble and the yuan. That shows where we're going as a world. The U.S. is losing its grip and its power, and the countries like China and Russia are gaining its power. So this is yet another sign of the new world order that's forming. The unipolar world is coming to an end, and the multipolar world is upon us. And, instead of continuing to make enemies, we should strive for peace with other nations. Instead of being greedy and sanctioning countries for our own interests, we should strive for global peace. Quit using wars like the war in Ukraine to have a proxy war with our enemies and promote peace as a nation. if we're top of the world order like we have been since World War II, we like to provoke a lot of people. We kind of have a responsibility, or not kind of, we do have a responsibility. If we're top of the world order, then, we should be promoting peace globally instead of pushing for the war in Ukraine to continue when there's been peace deals from Russia that we have shot down. We should be pushing for peace in Russia and Ukraine. We should be pushing for peace in the Middle East. And if you look, Russia didn't do anything with Ukraine or make any big military invasions when Trump was in office. He did with Obama, Bush, and now Biden. He didn't do it with Trump. Why? Because Trump, through strength, not through weakness and bowing down. And, I think the left likes to see peace as weakness, or not even really the left. I mean, majority of the left, but mainly the neocons and the shadow government in DC. They see peace as, well, not only weakness, but they see peace as, they don't see it as a money-making opportunity. I think that's the main problem of it. But they see peace as a weakness, I believe. They see it as we're letting them win, when instead we can have a compromise with other countries to where both sides win. Instead of white-knuckling it and it's either our way or the highway as a nation, when you do that, you make more enemies than friends. And this is, we're reaping what we sow right now when you have organizations like BRICS forming and are taking away your power that you have over other countries. So, all that to say, we should be promoting peace. And if we do that, then we'll probably be able to survive in this new world order forming, because we'll be making more friends than enemies. And right now, we're making a lot of enemies, and our enemies are starting to become stronger than us and our allies. Like, for example, if a war broke out right now between BRICS nations and NATO nations, then who do you think would win? My money's not really on NATO as of now. I don't think NATO, the US and NATO, will win a war with Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and whoever decides to ally with Russia and China in that scenario. I mean, it's nothing like we have the strongest military in the world, but when you're fighting two global superpowers together, that's tough. And I don't think we win that battle. I mean, we probably may be able to keep it close for a little bit, but in the long run, I don't think we win that battle. So we need to be smart and realize what's going on and start to make peace with these countries and cooperate with them to promote peace. The Taiwan issue, China knew where the U.S. stood on Taiwan, and they knew through Trump's strength they wouldn't be tempted to do that. But now the world's on fire because we have weak leaders like Joe Biden. They don't show strength to countries like Iran and Russia and China. Instead, we show weakness and that we're scared of them, and they're taking advantage of us. So strength promotes peace. You get peace through strength. You don't get peace through weakness. You get chaos through weakness, like we're seeing right now globally, not just in the Middle East, but in Russia with the war in Ukraine, and also what potentially could happen in Taiwan with China slowly surrounding Taiwan, it seems. So all that to say, we've dug ourselves in our own hole here because we have continued to want to make enemies, it seems, with our constant sanctions and wanting to force people to obey us. And China even said it itself. Xi Jingping said that the U.S. is trying to dominate the world order, and he's right. We've done that since World War II, pretty much. So if we want to survive this new world order of China and Russia gaining power, and when I say this, I'm not pro-China or Russia, I'm pro-American, and I want us to succeed and thrive. And we're not going to succeed and thrive if we're stubborn and continue wanting to alienate ourselves from countries like Russia and China. Then we're not going to survive that transition. We're going to be left behind. And, it's almost like if you don't want U.S. dominance of the world, you're not pro-American. No, I'm pro-peace, and I'm pro-American to survive. I want America to thrive. And we're not going to thrive if we continue to be stubborn and force everyone to obey us. I don't want that to happen, because we're coming to a point right now where that's not going to work, because countries can go to a place like BRICS, and if China and Russia launch an attack against us, then we got more enemies than allies in that scenario. So being pro peace and wanting the United States to be at peace with our enemies instead of constantly alienating ourselves and provoking other global superpowers, you're not anti-American for wanting that. You're pro-American because you want America to survive and to thrive and to be at peace. Not wanting America to be at war, that should be pro-American, because war is not good for, obviously, the economy, but it's not good. I mean, war is just not good in any area. But it's almost like the neocons want you to think that you should be on America's side to dominate everybody. Everybody should be under America's foot, and global dominance should be the goal. No, global peace should be the goal, right? And we will be at the top. We just may not be alone if China and Russia continue to grow like they are, and that's okay. I'm not so set on America being dominant over the world. I'm set on America thriving, there being peace, not only in America, but globally. And we have a responsibility of that if sitting atop of the world like we are and have been for quite some time. So no, you're not anti-American for wanting peace with countries like Russia and China. You're pro-American because you're, instead of wanting conflict, you're wanting peace. And there's no thriving with constant conflict and chaos. With peace, you can thrive as a nation. There doesn't have to always be confrontation and provocation. You can thrive while being at peace and not having constant enemies with China and Russia. You're not a Putin ally. You're not somebody who's a Putin sympathizer or a China sympathizer for wanting that. So all that to say, this New World Order is forming, and this is another incidence of, Xi Jinping is flat out saying it publicly. He's not denying it or hiding from it, and he's not really wrong. And the United States will have to make some changes if they don't want to get swept away by this New World Order forming of China and Russia and BRICS. I want to talk about the issue going on in Brazil with X. Brazil is trying to get X banned in its country. Brazil's Supreme Court claims that Elon Musk is spreading disinformation. And, Elon Musk in this scenario is the only thing standing between, democracy and totalitarianism in Brazil right now. The Brazilian government reportedly has told ex-employees in Brazil that they will be arrested, according to Musk. And I said according to Musk, but just recently, even before I start this pod, the Supreme Court confirmed this, that the ex-employees in Brazil have been warned that they will be arrested if they don't cooperate and help Brazil to censor free speech. And free speech is a fundamental part of a free democracy. Disinformation is not a threat when it comes from the citizens. And you want to know why? Because if you're curious enough on a topic to see if someone is speaking the truth, then you can do that. And, I liken free speech to sort of a laissez-faire economy. You give total freedom to free speech, and the truth will ultimately prevail. Because the people who spread disinformation will get corrected and mocked. And they'll get corrected and mocked by the educated people who value truth. And if you just want to blindly listen to disinformation without doing the research yourself, then, you would find a way to be an idiot anyways. That's just the truth. And the truth will ultimately prevail with freedom of speech. And, X's community notes are a great system that were in place to correct disinformation on the platform. But lies will always be corrected with freedom of speech. And, it always finds a way. And if it's not on a minor scale, then, do your own research. And people who don't do their own research, they're going to be sheep and follow whatever they're told anyways. It's not Elon Musk's responsibility in that way. It's not Elon Musk's responsibility to make sure everybody's not blindly following crazy statements made on his platform. His responsibility is to promote free speech, put in place things like community notes that correct things that are just blatantly wrong. And like I said, with freedom of speech, and you allow all speech to be spoken, the truth will ultimately prevail, because the people who value truth will correct the people who are blatantly spreading lies and disinformation. So disinformation, when coming from the citizens in a democracy where freedom of speech is allowed, is not really a threat, because it will correct itself. The there's enough people who value truth, who are educated enough on topics and fight for truth, they will correct the disinformation on a widespread scale. And like I said, on the isolated incidents where, somebody sees something, and if they're curious enough to know what the truth is, they will look it up and do their own research themselves. That's really our responsibility as citizens. And the people who don't and blindly listen to it, then they were kind of a lost cause anyways in that way. That's why I believe on it. That's free speech. Truth will prevail in a sort of laissez-faire way of just letting all speech to be free. But when the government is to decide what can and can't be said, then that's no longer a free democracy. That's totalitarianism. And let's say that they are well-intentioned and that they truly are trying to, quote, save democracy, like they like to say when they're wanting censorship, which is oxymoronic. That sets a precedent where governments are now allowed to censor people that they don't like and to spread its own propaganda, aka totalitarianism, like what you see in China and Russia. What's happening in Brazil is incredibly important right now, because not only is it important for Brazil and its democracy, but, quote, democracy. Brazil is trending towards it's not trending towards a good way with its government. And this is a great example of that. But this is also important for democracies globally, because this sets a precedent. X, I believe, is the greatest platform for free speech on earth, and it must stand to allow people to speak openly and say what is on their minds. Even if you want to spread disinformation, you should be allowed to do that, because you will ultimately be corrected. That's how it works. The truth ultimately prevails, period. But it has to be allowed to do that. It can't have restrictions on it, because when you have restrictions on speech, the people who truly want to spread disinformation, and it's not Elon Musk, it's people like the people in the Brazilian government and people in the United States government, they want to spread their own agendas and their own propaganda. And free speech stands in the way of that, because people will ultimately correct them. So them trying to get rid of free speech proves my point, because they know that they will be openly corrected and mocked by the people who are educated and value truth when they're openly spreading lies. I mean, if you don't believe me, go to any X post on Joe Biden and go to the comments. It's filled with people just openly mocking him and telling him how he's lying blatantly when he says that. So, and not only Joe Biden, any politician. And, Community Notes is a great example of that. You had Community Notes. There's a Community Note on an FBI post. So there's no boundaries. There's no, the government is, you can't be touched with the government on correcting their lies. The government trying to censor free speech proves my point, that they know that their lies and misinformation cannot stand with free speech. There has to be censorship in place, and there has to be checks to where free speech can't prevail, because that's the only way that lies will prevail. Truth will ultimately prevail with freedom of people to speak. And, saying that people have the right to lie doesn't mean you support it, or that you think that people should lie. But what you're saying is you're allowing free speech for everyone, because that also means you can't put restrictions on people who want to spread disinformation, because that's not free speech. That's not a free democracy for everyone to openly speak what's on their mind. So, like I said, people want to spread disinformation. The truth will ultimately prevail with freedom of speech. The truth will always prevail. And the people who want to get rid of free speech, they're the ones that want to spread disinformation. It's not Elon Musk and X. The people who want to control free speech, they don't want a free democracy. They want totalitarianism. They want control. They want to control the narrative, because that's the only way that they achieve their agendas. That's the only way that they get what they want. And they want to brainwash people. If you notice, the fight for censorship is only on one side of the aisle, and it's the left. It's not the right. The right wants free speech, and they're the ones that are attacked most by the media. They're the ones that are attacked most by, media platforms for their political ideologies. Sorry. The left is not attacked nearly as much by mainstream media as the right is. So they should be the ones, theoretically, that would want censorship and control. Like if Trump was really the dictator and authoritarian that the left likes to say he is, then he should have been the one that would promote, censorship and free speech. If he truly is that authoritarian leader that they said that he is, he didn't. The left is, and Biden is, and they like to say that this is a fight for democracy. It's completely stupid and ironic because the basic fundamental part of democracy is free speech and people being able to speak what's on their mind. If somebody disagrees with you, they're able to say their opinions just as much as you, and you guys can have a discourse and a debate on it. But just because you don't like what somebody's saying doesn't mean that they don't have a right to say it or shouldn't have a right to say it. Free speech is a basic fundamental part of a democracy, and without free speech, then that is you start to trend towards totalitarianism, and this is what we're seeing in Brazil right now. So like I said, just because you're saying somebody should have a right to spread lies, and Elon Musk is simply giving a platform for free speech, and somebody who wants to spread misinformation has just as much of a right to do that as people who want to spread the truth, because the truth will ultimately win. The people who are spreading misinformation will be corrected and mocked, and the truth should be at your fingertips and available. So if you see something you want to validate for yourself if it's true, then you have the right to go and do your own research on that, and you can ultimately decide if it's true. That's our responsibility as citizens. Wanting to control speech on a wide scale, you don't have that anymore. You're told what the government tells you, and that's where you trend towards a totalitarian government. So free speech needs to be protected in democracies. It is a basic fundamental part of a democracy, and I don't think Brazil will ultimately win, but right now it's setting a precedent for countries globally, including the United States, because we know how much Joe Biden hates Elon Musk and the left hates Elon Musk. Why? Because he's for free speech, and they don't want free speech. They want to control the narrative. Anybody who wants to promote free speech is a threat to the left, and they're insecure in their own lies. They don't want the truth out. And obviously the Republican Party is not scared of free speech. Why? Because they're secure in their own beliefs, and if somebody disagrees with them, they're okay with that because they can have a back and forth, and they know that the truth will ultimately prevail. And that's what will happen with no restrictions on free speech. The truth will ultimately prevail. That's why only one side wants censorship, and it's not the right. So fingers crossed that this doesn't come to happen in Brazil, where X is taken away from Brazil. I don't think it ultimately will, but when you have the Supreme Court doing this, then it makes you wonder, who's going to have the authority to stop them. I think ultimately X will be able to be open in Brazil, but if it doesn't, then that's just a precedent for countries globally to be able to just get rid of platforms that promote free speech and is a threat to their own agendas and their own narratives. And I say that including the United States, and which is scary, but it's the truth. So let's hope that Brazil does the right thing and free speech will prevail. I also wanted to talk about Israel claims that they have a date to go into Rafah. Benjamin Netanyahu claimed that they have had a date set for an operation into Rafah, and Anthony Blinken has refuted those claims. Absurd. How crazy is that? Our own leader is refuting claims from another leader on his own war and his own military objectives. This is not the United States' war. We don't have a right to say what Benjamin Netanyahu is saying is true or not. Oh, that's not true. They don't have a date set. How do you know? And even if you did know, who are you to refute your allies' claims? This is not our war. Who are we? Who is Anthony Blinken to say stuff like that? How is he, one, how does he know? And two, even if he did know the truth and that they're lying, this is not our war. This is not our place to say that. Blinken and the Biden administration, I've said this many times, I'll say it again, they need to get out of the way and let Israel do what it needs to do. Stop working overtime to try and win back your voters and let Israel defeat Hamas. You claim Israel is your ally, yet you're being a speed bump for them because of your own political motives. And Rafah is the last piece of the puzzle for Israel to defeat Hamas. They need to be allowed to do that from its biggest ally, and really its only ally now. So Anthony Blinken needs to shut his mouth, stop talking about other countries' wars, and not only other countries' wars, our allies' wars. We like to hijack other conflicts and make it our own. Look what we're doing in Ukraine, and we're starting to do it here in the Middle East with Israel. Who are we to tell Israel what to do? And thankfully, it appears that Israel is not listening to the United States and going ahead with its military objectives to do what it needs to do to protect its own country and its own citizens. Wish Ukraine would do that. They're not. But the United States loves to just hijack these conflicts, mainly when the left is in office. There was no issues of that when Trump was in office, mainly because there was no conflicts being started. I talked about that earlier. But, we like to hijack these conflicts and tell them what to do. And we need to stop doing that. That's why I talked about earlier of the United States likes to dominate everything globally, and you don't get peace through that. And the United States doesn't thrive when that happens. The United States continually being involved in conflicts around the world does not promote. The United States doesn't thrive in that scenario. When we're constantly inputting ourselves in conflicts around the world, the United States doesn't thrive in that scenario. Not only our economy, but just as a whole. It's not good to be involved in conflicts, but we appear to be obsessed with that. So we need to let Israel do what it needs to do to defeat Hamas, because that threat is on our allies' border, and not just Hamas, but they also have threats from Iran and Hezbollah. So we need to let them do what they need to do. Get out of the way. Stop meddling yourselves in other conflicts, especially our allies' conflicts. Let them do what you need to do. And, if we start doing that globally, then we will have peace globally and we will thrive as a nation. Stop hijacking other conflicts and trying to dominate the conflict and get your own interest out of it, and let your ally do what it needs to do. So let's hope that Israel moves forward with this Rafah operation. I think that they will. I don't think there's any scenario that they don't, because they know that's what they need to do, with or without the U.S.'s support. So if they need to do that, like they say they need to, and that's the last box that needs to be checked to defeat Hamas, then go do it. And then move on to Hezbollah, which is a much bigger threat, and that threat needs to be addressed sooner or later. And hopefully the United States can continue to back its ally, and instead of trying to constantly be a speed bump for them for its own political motives, trying to get back its young anti-Semitic vote, which is what the Biden administration is doing. Political motives and war, especially when it's not your own war, is one, ridiculous, two, dangerous, and it's just idiotic, and it's just not a good thing to do. Hopefully the Biden administration will come to their senses and start to support Israel, and not even just support Israel, just let go and let Israel do what it needs to do, instead of being control freaks like they are in Ukraine too. And if God forbid China does invade Taiwan, what will happen in Taiwan? So let's hope that doesn't happen, and let's hope that Israel will go ahead and with this operation into Rafah to defeat Hamas. I believe that they will. I wanted to end the podcast talking about this Arizona ruling today. Arizona ruled 4-2 to make nearly all abortions illegal. And Democrats are having a come apart about this, claiming it's another attack on human rights. Or not human rights, on women's rights. With birth rates declining, we need to promote births. And the argument of pro-choice being for women and for women's rights is ironic, considering they're taking away the greatest gift that women have inherently, which is to produce another life. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't want to have a baby, then don't have sex in the first place. Sex is not something for your own desires. It's not something to fulfill your own needs and for enjoyment. It's a sacred thing to produce a life. And it's extremely selfish if someone can't raise a baby, if they're not able to do it financially, or if the situation is just not good to bring a human life into this, then you need to be responsible and not have sex in the first place. It's selfish. Abortion is ultimately the most selfish thing you can do. To produce another life in the womb when you were doing it for your own selfish desires, and then ending another life, that same life, because it's inconvenient for you, is the most selfish thing you could do. And, obviously there's cases of rape and incest where, they were victims of that, and that's obviously horrible, but adoption exists for that reason. There's no reason to end a life, period, whether it's for your own inconvenience or not. Things like adoption exist for that reason. There's no excuse to end a life, and the child deserves to have a chance at life. The narrative of the mother being at risk, too, for giving birth is highly exaggerated, and those problems are solved with a C-section. So adoptions and C-sections eliminate the excuses from the left on why abortion should be allowed. And like I said, with birth rates in decline, we need to be promoting births. And I saw a Democrat saying that today as if it was a bad thing. He's like, oh, the right wants to stop abortions because birth rates are in decline, like kind of mocking it. Yeah, that's a problem, not only for the United States, but globally. I've talked about the birth rates being in decline on past episodes in the United States, but we're like at 1.66 birth rates per woman when in the 70s we were 3.7, something like that. We need to bring that number back up. We need more babies. And the government, like the Biden administration, likes to replace American babies with third world workers for lower wages and new voters. That's a problem. And, like I said, it's inherently selfish because the greatest gift that women have inherently is to produce a life. And to get rid of that is selfish, and it's sad because, you can make, like I said, there's no excuse to end a life and to get rid of a baby's chance to have a life. There's ways around it. And if there's any health issues, a C-section solves most of those. I was a C-section baby. Those problems can be solved. And if you don't want to raise the baby yourself, then adoption exists. Like, there are ways around it. There's no excuse to end a life. And getting rid of your gift to be a mother, which is the greatest gift that women have, when they say they want to get rid of that, the left likes to say they want to get rid of that for women's rights. They think you're stupid. And ironically, they're taking away your greatest gift. Oh, it's for women's rights. If you want to promote women's rights, tell women to be responsible. If they can't raise a baby on their own, don't have sex in the first place, and be a responsible human being. Instead of enabling people who can't afford to have a baby to have sex for their own desires and for their own enjoyment, when that sex is a sacred thing between a man and a woman to produce another life, you're doing something that is made to produce a life, and then you're getting mad when a life is produced and then ending a life, committing murder. There's no, that is evil, first off, but you're not being a responsible adult. So let's push for responsibility to not have sex until you're ready to have a baby. And when it's crazy, right, to think when you partake in an act that is made to produce a life and then a life is produced, God forbid that happen, that's on you. It's not on the baby. It's not the baby's fault that it was conceived, and the baby doesn't deserve to get murdered for that. If you don't want to raise it yourself, fine, put it up for adoption. If there's health issues with the birth process, fine, have a C-section. There's ways around it. It's selfish and it's irresponsible to have an abortion, and rulings like this are good. This is a good sign, especially in Arizona, of all places, which is primarily left. But Democrats are having a come apart about this. And, if you're so pro-women, like the left claims that they are, and they say that the right isn't, stop trying to take away women's greatest gift inherently to produce a life, and, promote them to be responsible adults instead of, degrading them and enabling them to continue just to sleep with whoever they want when they aren't responsible enough and aren't able to properly raise a child. You're partaking in an act that is made to produce a life. So don't be surprised when a life is produced and then you're not able to kill that for your own convenience. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to commit murder for your own convenience. So, instead of running towards the abortion route, maybe we should promote responsibility. And like I said, obviously awful cases like rape and incest happens, and I'm not promoting that. I'm not for that. That stuff is awful. But the baby still has a right to exist, and I don't blame women for not wanting to raise their own rapist's baby. I wouldn't want to either if I was a woman. Put it up for adoption. Don't end a life. Don't end what will be a life. So like I said, there's ways around everything, and I'm not belittling instances like rape and incest that happen. Obviously, they're horrible, and it makes me sick to my stomach. But the bottom line is, and this is not just about birth rates. The bottom line is, a baby has a right to have a chance at life, and birth rates is a part of that. But it's not. This is not an argument simply for numbers and birth rates. This is a moral argument. Nobody has a right to end a baby's life for their own convenience, period. And like I said, I'm not belittling the awful cases of rape and incest, but adoption exists. Go that route. Please don't end that baby's chance to have a life. So all that to say that, this ruling is a good sign, but keep that in mind when you see that Democrats want to say that this is an attack on women's rights. Keep in mind who's trying to get rid of the greatest gift that women have in raising a life and producing a life. They're not pro-women. They're pro their own agenda. And you can go down a dark route of why the left's pushing abortion. But the bottom line is they're wanting to get rid of women's greatest gift to produce a life. So you can't claim to be pro-women. If you're really pro-women, promote women to be more responsible and be responsible adults. And don't degrade them to allow them to continue these irresponsible and selfish acts and then have a easy way out. That's not how life works. Don't partake in an act to produce another life and then end that life because it's inconvenient for you. So that's my rant on abortion for today. I've done that rant before, but this ruling today, it's a good ruling, obviously, to make nearly all abortions illegal. And Trump actually just did a speech talking about how he wants abortion to be a state issue. I realize what he's doing politically. It's a smart move there. But, getting rid of Roe v. Wade, having less government and giving the states power, that's a route we should go down anytime we get a chance to go down that route. But, morally, baby has a right to exist and to have a chance at life. It should be protected and should have constitutional protection. But with the birth rates in decline, and obviously, like I just said, the moral argument, abortion is the most selfish thing you could do. And you're not pro-women when you're promoting women to get rid of their greatest gift, which is to produce a life. And be a responsible adult. If you're not willing to bring a baby into this world, then don't have sex in the first place, period. Well, that's all the topics for today I had to talk about. I'll be back tomorrow for another episode. I'll see you guys then.